Oh, maybe it's the spring in the air, or whatever. But I'm in a mood to reminisce and to sort of share those reminiscences with someone, and I don't have anyone to really talk to other than my current wife, which, yeah, I've discussed things with her, these things, other things. But it's not quite the same, I don't know, in terms of it's hard to have the same conversations with someone you've had them with before. The first time that you have a conversation with someone, it's one thing, but like watching a movie again or something, it's just not right. You know, it's like you could do things with someone again. You could play a game with them again. You could go for a particular walk again. But having the exact same conversations, and that's something I'm liable to do, is not, even from my point of view, with my weird habits and fixations, it's not a good way to communicate with others. It's almost like rehearsing the same play, but with no real end point in mind. So somehow I can pretend you, whoever you all are interested in whatever I have to say, or just need to fall asleep and my voice will do that. So I guess my mind kind of turned, and again, I think it's the time of year, sort of late February, moving into March, towards my first wife. And you know, I can enjoy those memories on my own, and enjoy them it is, even though there's sadness and melancholy around them. Still, overall, those may have been, probably were, some of the best years that I've ever had. Years that I'll never be able to replace, or not replace, but match in terms of a number of things. I'm not so young. I'm not so loving. But also the times are different. I'm not going to find easily other people, and I'm not just talking about love interests, but any other people, gamers, everything, who are as young as I was then, and as young as the people I dealt with. And mentally I haven't changed, but physically obviously I have. And unless, you know, I mean, I could hang out with younger people and be kind of the creepy older guy who's in groups, and that there are those people, but like the guys, the people who will come up and start conversations poorly with everyone, I don't want to be one of those people. And I no longer sort of draw people in towards me, maybe because I'm in my own apartment or condo and there's nobody else around, but for whatever reason, I no longer draw people towards me at random the way I once did, and even not so very long ago. Some of it, of course, methods of dress, but some of it not. I don't know, I just don't look as interesting, maybe, I don't know. But And maybe I've learned to shunt people away more. Although I've always been very, very good at that. But I wanted to think a little bit about sort of the course of a relationship there. And a friend, well, one of my housemates, a couple of them actually, were friends with an ex-boyfriend of hers. And she had run out of kind of places to live. And he kind of brought her over with the intention of her, I think, living in the closet of my two housemates. Now, she was very young at the time. Not, ridiculously, but she was only 17. She was still in high school. I was significantly older, 25 or so. My first thought, I don't remember quite what we were sitting there, a whole bunch of us, watching a video of a performance art piece that I had been involved in. I was straightening spaghetti. And I didn't know why she was there. I knew everyone else, at least vaguely, who was in the area, and I kind of plopped down after being invited. Hey, you're in this, you want to see, or whatever. I don't even remember. And I remember kind of noticing, wow, that's kind of a cute girl, and then at a later point, kind of perving on her a little bit. Not, obviously not in a way that anyone would ever notice. Just in my particularly creepy manner, which was she kind of passed out on the couch, and I stole a couple of glances at them. She was kind of cute, she had a cute little cap on, and but I see people I think are cute, or I think look interesting in a way that I'd like to meet them just in general, without ever doing anything about it or thinking anything about it. I just figured, whatever. And I ended up going up and I think taking a nap, but I was planning on going out, and I put some music on. It's getting, I think seeing her had kind of energized me to spend a little bit of my very meager cash at that point on going out to the bar and, I don't know, maybe having ridiculous hopes that I'd meet people there who would be drawn to me instead of just being passed out on the couch or whatever. And I was kind of blaring music, as I like to do when I'm getting dressed, and I was really kind of dressing up more than probably was appropriate for me to go out alone to a bar at that time. Again, maybe hoping to make an impression on the way out. I often had those kind of motivations probably without even realizing them. But, so I mean, I had my cape on and sort of sword fighter outfit and a gaucho hat. And I think I traced the 2 black stripes on my cheek. That was something that started with a different girl. But became sort of part of my regalia at the time. And I hear this loud knock on my bedroom door. Now, my bedroom door at that point, I'm trying to think if it worked at that point. I don't I don't know if I had a working door. At some point or another, it was just sort of propped because I don't remember what happened, but it came off the hinges, and I just had it sort of half propped open. But I think at that point, I still had a door, and I opened it up with kind of this, oh shit, what's gonna happen? And here she is, and she's telling me, oh, I like your music. Well, I was playing Violent Femmes. It turned out that was, you know, her favorite, or one of her favorite bands at that point. And I don't know what happened. I mean, I don't think I said much. I was already fairly well soused, and I'm like, you want to go to Cones? Like, what the hell? What are you talking about? You want to go to Cones? Which was just referring to almost the name of a bar that I tended to go to. She says, well, no, I can't. I'm on. And when she figures out that it's a bar, she can't. She's underage. And I'm like, oh, that won't matter. You know, I know people bring underage people there all the time. They don't check ID. It's no big deal. So she agreed, which was shocking to me, but I had no idea where this was going. And then on the way down, I came up with the idea, maybe, you know, just always try to put some protection, try to put some safety in place. Not for me, I think it's always for other people. I don't know, you know, the idea of just going out with one other person that I don't even know. I'm terrified on so many different levels. Not so much for me, but for how they will feel in my presence. So I end up asking our mutual friend, essentially, the only person she knows left in the house, I think, if she wants to go with us too. And she agrees. And we actually all walk out to the bar, and you know, I order beer, and my ex kind of mentions she doesn't really like beer, and I'm kind of like, oh crap, you know, one of these picky female types. And so I end up ordering something for her. I mean, I'm buying for everyone at this point, even though I have no money. But I figure I invited everyone. I kind of owe it at first. You know, anyway, I don't know. I get her some vodka drink, like a sea breeze or something like that. But as time goes on, I sort of understand the situation and why she's there, and this, that, and the other. And the worry here, of course, is other people, you know, people who know her but maybe don't know the story. I'll watch this because I am still, you know, I'm kind of on Facebook with people who are, but you know, I'm sure we revealed that story. I'm not even sure what happened from that point on, except that it became very clear that, you know, she was interested in me, to the extent of, you know, she was playing with my hand or something like that. And it's just very, very, very odd. I never know how to process those situations. I don't remember. I can remember one time. I can remember so many times. I mean, I can remember being on the bus home from high school and some girl playing with my penis and I not getting the idea that she might be interested in me, you know. And but there was a sort of teasing aspect to that whole thing. But you know, when she invited me to her house, I just kind of took it as, oh, that must be a trick, you know, and maybe it was. I don't know. I never can figure these things out. I can never tell how, but now I wouldn't care as much. If someone was that blatant, I would get it. And then there was another time where some girl was sucking on my fingers that I knew, and feeding me things and stuff like that, and it was just like you had to really hit me over the head with a brick at that point. Now it's just a 2x4, I think, and. But at this point, I was drunk enough that I allowed myself to kind of understand, maybe. And on the way home, because I knew the situation, I said, "Look, you don't have to sleep in their closet. You can sleep with me." And she said, "Yeah." And then I don't know. We were like making out, and. I don't remember what she said, but it was something kind of along the lines of, that she hadn't decided if we were going to have sex or not. And I came up with one of the, most blatantly douchebag comments I think I've ever made, which was something like, "You're too hot to stop now," or something like that. And it actually was the truth. But yeah, it was kind of funny because I could contrast that with another girl where I don't know what was happening. We were making out pretty heavily. This was before, and I don't know, I was starting to take her pants down to go down on her or something, and she's like, "No, no." And yeah, that's kind of like, "What?" And she said, "I'm just not ready for that." And I was kind of like, "Oh, okay." And we just went back to making out and then fell asleep together, And that's, at that time, for me, that was fine. I mean, wasn't necessarily physically comfortable, but that was fine. But here, so much of it must be the alcohol, in the sense that I that's just not at all the kind of thing I would have said. I mean, certainly, I wouldn't have pressed the issue, I think. But who knows? I was pretty crazy in that period of my life, actually. Certain times in my life, I take on the persona of characters in books, and it's usually pretty, not necessarily villainous, but flawed. In that period, I remember not far from that period, taking on the character from the evil side from The Dark Half, or something like that, a Stephen King novel. I don't think that was what was going on there at all. But who knows, I remember taking Thomas Covenant on as a character for a while. I also remember trying to be Jodie Foster for a while, but I steal other people's personalities sometimes, I think. And sometimes I project mine and force people into mine. I'm not sure. But I guess that's a fairly common thing in socializing, sort of taking on different traits, but I mean, this seems stronger in some ways. And we lived together in one little room for, I don't know how long. It feels like forever, but it couldn't have been, It probably was about a year at most, maybe less than that. Things went bad. I wasn't able to make rent for the most part at that point, but on top of that, her bike got stolen, and then she stole it back when she saw somebody who had it, and the family basically attacked us. The guy smashed her over the head with a fucking tree log, He was just out of prison, not the guy who stole the bike. He was related to them. And as soon as that happened, I happened to have a sword cane in my hand at the time, don't ask. And without even thinking, the blade was out, and between not that guy's eyes, because that guy basically hit her and ran, but sort of the family patriarch. Right. I mean, it stopped right here. And everybody just froze. And people who aren't used to swords, you know, I mean, if I had pulled a gun, they may not have been as scared. But people who aren't used to swords, man, it just, I had never noticed that kind of fear. You know, I mean, it was just really intense. And the hubris thing about it was, I mean, this was an old 19th century sword cane. And there's no question I could have put the guy's eye out with it or something, but I mean, I could have done the same with a pointed stick. But there's no way I could fight with it. First of all, it wasn't sharp, and secondly, it was held onto the handle with wax because it had kind of rotted. The tang had rotted the wood away, or the wood that held the tang in place had rotted away. So I had it held with candle wax, but it looked sturdy, and it just right. And then I don't know. But after that, they started throwing rocks through windows and shit like that, and we had to move, and we ran downtown to neighborhoods. Different, better neighborhoods, really. The neighborhood I had been in was actually, it was fine. It had been student slums, but they started doing this gentrification, and they kind of didn't really do it right. They raised the rents, but basically what they managed to do was attract welfare families into the area instead of students. They raised the rents enough that students could no longer afford it, but people on welfare could. That's what we were starting to see, was the neighborhood had gone from mixed between, you know, families that had been there for 40, 50 years and student housing to the students being gone, and pretty much it just, I mean, it started turning into a war zone. I went back, you know, 5, 10 years later, it was just hell there. Really, really scary neighborhood after that. I don't know how it is now. I assume it's terrible still. But anyway, we moved closer to downtown. Now, we had already gone down to Allentown a few times to a place called The Topic. It's just this most awesome coffee shop. The first few times we went were for poetry night. I found out you gotta, you know, I just went and kind of listened, kind of looked at the cute chicks and everything. But I found out that you could, if you read your own poetry, you would get a free cup of coffee. And coffee there, I have to check to see if my battery's plugged in. Coffee there was fairly expensive, you know, it wasn't like going to Denny's and paying $1.20 and staying all night. I don't remember what it was. I think it was like 3 cups for $1. May have been more than that, I'm not sure. It was still not ridiculously expensive, but it was more, or maybe it was like three cups for like $2, or for $3. Like, I know you got like a cup and 2 wooden nickels when you bought coffee, and I don't know how much you paid for all that, but you would get a free coffee token if you read poetry at the poetry night. So I started writing poetry, not because I felt any need to write poetry, but because I wanted free coffee. And I don't know, I mean, it was well received, but mainly because I would put something into my reading, as opposed to these people who probably really cared about their poetry, who would read it like they were reading a textbook they didn't want to read. It was like they didn't have any connection with it at all. And I was making up these things that were, you know, really I don't know, more humorous than anything else, and not deeply my feelings, although maybe I could, I could draw and touch into them so that they were. It doesn't really matter to me because I'm kind of an actor. In all ways, I mean, throughout all life, I kind of never know if there's anything really there. Back when I was in college, my friend Evan taught me something kind of magical, which maybe he doesn't do, but it's what it looked like. He would just get ridiculously angry all at once, out of nowhere. I mean, we're talking about near berserk rage. And I thought, wow, he kind of gets his way when he does that. Let's try that. And yeah, I mean, if you just cultivate a blowing up, you don't have to lose control or anything, although you can kind of let it slip a little bit. It can be dangerous. I found just how dangerous at other times. But it's just this, amazing mechanism for influencing other people, is to just rage at them out of nowhere. It levels them. And around that period of my life, I was playing with that far too much. Certainly got my way more about things, though. Anyway, we moved closer down to there, and then started going, a couple nights a week or whatever. We had friends in the area. It was a nice situation. I'd go there, play Magic, play Go, just sit and hang out sometimes. Managed to meet people there that, both for gaming, people who we ended up enticing into, say, a vampire game that I was running, but also for other purposes. And we lived across the street from one of my friends. In fact, what had happened was I had gone, he had wanted to rent out, his family wanted, or his mom wanted to rent out the attic. And there was a bathroom up there, I think even a sink, and could have been a stove or something, had that been desirable. And we were in an emergency situation where we needed to find a place to move. And we looked, and we're definitely interested, but his mom was not happy about the idea of a couple moving in necessarily. And maybe I was a little too weird, even though she kind of knew me. But what she was able to point out was that the place across the street was for rent, or had a flat for rent, essentially. And the rest of it was unlived in. And basically we ended up figuring out a way, I left a huge part out during that, I'll go back. During that period where, and I think this is maybe what triggered this whole thinking, because I had a different conversation. But anyway, we ended up taking the place, and I got a loan from my parents so we could afford a couple of months, and she was able to get a job that was more regular than what she was doing at that point. And I kept, remained kind of a kept man, which of course is my calling in life. I'm a creature of leisure. A creature of indolence is more like it. I don't really understand how to ledge properly. But yeah, back a while, going back earlier, there was a point in our life, I don't know if I talked about this with you or not, I think just with my wife recently. So she and I got in an argument over, of all things, the game Bismarck. Not about the rules or anything, about her willingness to play it. And it really just escalated way out of hand to where we were living in the same single room, basically, but not speaking with each other. And she started sleeping down on the couch and stuff like that. And during this period, and it was just, it was for a couple of weeks, she started becoming close to another guy. And that was obviously tearing me in part, in pieces. And, you know, because, I mean, I very, very much love her still. And, I mean, the nature of my love is it's an act of will that does not end. And that's about all that it is. I don't think it necessarily means anything else. In fact, love is a prerequisite for hate. But I don't hate her. And I ended up going to the beach with my buddy Evan and his girlfriend at the time. And I don't remember what happened. I found a little plastic garbage can, and I was so melancholy and so sad there, and so thinking about, I don't want to lose what I have. I don't want to lose this woman who means so much to me. Over something so goddamn stupid, you know? I mean, come on. And that I clearly was. And I grabbed some sand on this little tiny, it's like a candy container. I don't know what they held, some kind of little garbage pail candy. It was about this big, but I found just the container and I filled it with some of the sand from Lake Erie and brought it back and mentioned my feelings, and it felt like everything was all right between us and we were okay. But the problem was, I was supposed to go down to visit my folks. And I think I had to go to Disney World. I think this was the trip to Disney World. Wow. Hope nobody knows my brother, including him. Here is this one. I think it was the trip to Disney World where we drove down and I was just farting continuously, kind of in his car seat. That may have been an earlier period. It's so hard to tell. But he was pretty young. I think that's that trip. And I hitched my way down with my psycho ex, a different girl, who deserves her own video, I'm sure. Not all the way. She would take me down to Route 17, and then from there I would hitch the rest of the way. And then we went, and you know, I was gone for a couple weeks between the hitchhiking and the trip and hanging out with my parents at their house and such. And I come back and, you know, I had thought we were on good terms again, that everything was okay, and that we kind of resolved everything in that last day or two or whatever. And I come back to find out that she slept with the guy. And not just at any old time, but during the time when I was gone. After I thought everything was all right, and I was like, that's it, you know. I'm not the leaving type, I always say that, but as my current wife pointed out, I might well be the throwing out type. Although I can be thrown out too pretty easily. And I don't know how many months we were apart there. We would have never seen each other again if she hadn't moved in with my psycho ex. Which, who knows? I mean, that was the weirdest thing, because they didn't even get along together anymore by that point. We had all the three of us had been pretty close at one point, but in fact, I brought my ex-wife in to see my psycho ex when she was in the hospital. basically just, recovered from a near-death operation. She's like, this is not the way you, introduce me to your new fling. But it all worked out there for a while at least. Anyway, she had moved in with her, and they didn't get along at all, and I don't know why she would turn to this one person, except maybe in the hopes that that would be a way to see me again. Or because she had no one else to turn to, and my PE was very much into taking in strays, like stray cats and such, and I would not have been able to leave her to the mercies of the world easily. And when I went to visit my psycho ex, I noticed there's my former girlfriend there as well, and I'm like, well, this is weird. And I don't know how it ended up transitioning, but essentially we ended up becoming a thing again. And it was sort of bittersweet. I have a lot of fear of being abandoned in this kind of way or whatever. And my first girlfriend ditched me after kind of treating me like shit in a lot of ways. And I guess I'm just kind of a doormat. Just a violent one. I don't know. But I'm really not sure how things moved forward. But I was clearly courting her again, and we would go out and sit out in the bleachers at the school yard there and just talk, and I don't know, I would read to her and stuff like that. And, just everything kind of worked back together now. This was before she moved back in with me, basically. And she had a job in that area. So, I mean, yeah, it may have been a decent amount of time, because she was already out of school by this point. So I think we were together in the one house for a couple of years before we moved on. But it's so hard. It's so long ago. I mean, that's what's so fucking crazy. This is more than 20 years ago, and it's the part of my life that was, I don't know, not necessarily the best, because it was so fucking chaotic, and I was in so much misery, but I also had more happiness than I think I've ever had. This was the period after she came back where I think I started seriously pursuing acting for a little while, trying to make a life out of that. And anyway, I don't remember quite what happened there. Let's see. That was after there was a fire at my psycho ex's. She moved into that place with help from the Red Cross. I think when she was moving out of that place, we got back together living in the same room again. And that's when the bicycle thing and all happened. But she was outside of my life for, I don't know, outside of my direct life, in terms of we weren't living together, although I was spending almost all of my time in her place. I'm basically a lesbian. I mean, we sleep together once, and I want us to be living together. Anyway, moving forward, when we were in Highgate was the street I was on in Buffalo. We were there for a couple of years, and it was pretty nice. I mean, we had a whole apartment kind of thing. It wasn't terribly big. It was probably a little smaller than where I am now. We had a nice sized bedroom. a living room that was kind of weird shape. But then that was the third floor. And the second floor, we had a piece of the second floor, which was a kitchen, and then we had a hallway that worked its way down to the street level. And I mean, there was a lot of pleasure in that place, a lot of enjoyment in that place. It was dark and kind of unpleasant in some ways because it was just this converted attic. But I ran my vampire games there once a week. That's really where they took off. And I had a buddy across the street who loved to game. We did Vietnam. We did Austerlitz, I think. Just tons of things. We had regular gaming nights and irregular ones. Not as much as maybe either I or he would like, but I think both of us were kind of reticent to set them up, just out of kind of the waiting for the other person to ask, maybe. I don't know. It's very much like me. And when he mentioned, gee, you know, we lived right across the street from each other for like 2-3 years, and we almost never gamed, like just the two of us. Normally it was multiplayer things. It was like, well, I don't know. You didn't say much. Because he was really kind of upset about the fact that, you know, we weren't gaming as much as he expected. And I would have been fine with it. I mainly gamed solo at that point. I always feel like I'm kind of imposing, but also imposing on myself when I game with someone else. Like, it is definitely something I want to do less of than solo gaming, no matter what the circumstances. But anyway, the place we were living in, somebody new bought it, and he started doing renovations and found asbestos. And I was like, okay. So I was going to give you guys about a year, and then, you know, at least another year on your lease or whatever, but because he had remodeling he wanted to do. He wanted to take over our kitchen, basically. We would have been in a much smaller place. You know, it was like, all right, I got to get you out. I can't have you there anymore at all. And he offered me the most wonderful deal. A huge 2-bedroom place for the same price as we were paying. Really nice layout, big tall ceilings. Not a claw-tooth tub, but the equivalent without the feet, or a claw-foot tub. But it was in horrible condition. It was like, fix it up, and you know, you can have it for cheaper. And I kind of went overboard with the fix it up thing. Went out, bought paints and stuff, spent a couple $100 on materials, and so I know a lot about spackling. I didn't really apprentice to a drywaller, but I kind of worked on my family's barn, which they converted into a house, and helped the drywaller out a great deal. And then when he couldn't do the work anymore, he did the ceilings because he was better. He was able to walk around on stilts, and I wasn't. But basically, he was able to show me enough that I did, you know, several rooms, and they were huge rooms worth of the seams and all kind of stuff like that. So I was able to do, you know, a really good job on fixing the plaster that was cracking and everything. The landlord came in, he's like, "Oh my God, I wasn't expecting." I mean, I did trim around the molding and all that. I painted that separate colors. It was really a beautiful, beautiful looking job that I did. I really didn't expect this. I'm never going to raise your rent. Well, that ended up a lie, but not a terrible one. Okay, it looks like my battery died there. I'm going to try to see if this is going to work better. At least I can hear it. It took several years before he raised the rent, and it wasn't by all that much. He raised it about $100. I mean, we were significantly under market value for rent there. There it goes again. This is not going to work. Oh, I'm just not seeing. Okay. But we started to catch up to the market value of the place. And then it had caught up at one point, and it was getting to be too much of a burden to pay the rent. I mean, especially since who knows what happened. It trimmed out. It didn't make a noise this time. It made a noise last time when the battery went. So you lose out on, you know, some pretty melancholy stuff that I don't know where it was. Just that the place that we moved to was no longer sufficient, and that my caring was being expressed more in doing housework and little things to make her life easier than in being demanding of her time for either gaming or love or whatever. Just walks, you know, being together. None of that was happening anymore. We were just... I was subsuming my desires to meet needs that I perceived in her, and what's the funniest of all is that those needs that I perceived, they weren't the important things. What was tearing us apart was how distant I was, how we didn't do things anymore, how we didn't go out on walks, how we didn't, how I didn't demand her time anymore. And then Mars was as bright as it can possibly be. It was at the closest it's been in for whoever knows how long. And this is no longer 20 years ago. Now we're looking at a little more than 10 years ago. We'd been together for a long time. And, you know, it felt like we were going to be together forever. It felt like, at least for me, some of the dreams that I had acting, finding a second woman that we could both really commit to and live with forever. That these things were just gone. And that I had settled into a certain existence, and that was going to get shaken up. It was going to get shaken up if she had to move for grad school. It was going to get shaken up, you know, by wherever work would be or whatever. But at least in theory we had each other, and things would eventually settle down and be better again. If we had to move someplace like San Diego, you know, we were discussing, well, how the hell would we live in San Diego without me working, and whether I'd be able to work. And yeah, I think I would, but who knows? You know, the hardest part for me was always finding work more than anything else, really. Although other aspects get in the way, like, wow, I have both copies of Sword in the Stars up here. I didn't think that was the case. Huh. But anyway, with Mars bright in the sky and things degenerating so rapidly, you know, here's the thing, it wasn't even like, you know, we weren't fighting or anything. It's just, it was deteriorating and I didn't understand why. And later, I guess she kind of explained it, is that she couldn't stay with me and stay sane. And that didn't make a lot of sense, but it was that I wasn't showing those feelings that won her love or whatever. And I should have known better. I'll tell you a couple of things. These really sunk into me deep. One was she got in an argument with her grandmother back when back when we were in the first place we kind of rented together for real, across from my friend's house. And, or actually it was as we were moving between places. She got in an argument with her grandmother, I think about me, and basically cut off all ties with her. Just completely. And her grandmother would call, would leave messages, would leave food, stuff like that. She would not acknowledge her, would not speak to her or anything. And that made no sense to me. I didn't understand how a person could cut someone off that completely. Yes, I mean, her grandmother annoyed the shit out of her. They didn't really get along. But all the same, they are family. And to me, I mean, I don't get along with my family, but I couldn't do anything that drastic. Although the effect is the same. I don't have a phone, I don't call them, I don't talk to them. But I also don't feel that sort of righteous, yeah, I have nothing to do with you anymore, which she seemed to have. And that scared the shit out of me, because if you could put aside your family that way, you know, what makes me think I'm any different, any better, any safer? And the next thing was, as we made the move between places, now things were already very, very bad between us at this point, but without me really understanding. Like, I knew we weren't enjoying ourselves like we used to, but I thought that was just sort of the circumstances. I didn't realize just how much, and to some extent I think some of her friends were helping her to turn against me in this sort of way. We're helping her, you know, not in the sense of, oh, he's a bad person, but in the sense of helping her to see that I was the problem, and that, okay, well, then your solution is what? You know, get away or be miserable. It's like, no, those aren't the only solutions, you know? There are other ways of looking at things. But yeah, she didn't trust me enough to put it in my hands until it was too late, is what it came down to. But as we were moving, she got rid of the stuffed lamb that she had before she could remember. You know, her mother had shaved this thing to prevent her from inhaling the fuzz on it. She was that young when she got it, and which was a horrible thing anyway. But this was, you know, the stuffed animal, the one thing from her childhood that it just had been constant with her. She threw it away. With this, again, this kind of coldness of, okay, I do not need this anymore in my life. Being able to make that decision, that's so alien to me. I mean, if you had hauled this around, if you had held this for all this much time, how can you possibly cut it out of your life? And, you know, maybe that was just preparing. There was another too, you know, her biological father, whom she didn't know, had never met, came by to try to visit, gave her a camera as a gift, kind of wanted to know her, and she was just completely cold to him. I can't imagine that, but that fit in more, because she did not owe him anything, in her view. And I could understand that. I could understand her view there, but I couldn't have done that, you know. I couldn't be that way. Anyway, with little stops and starts and misses, this is again one of those things I don't even know if I should load up, but I almost feel like, at least for some of you, and I don't even know who, but some of you, not that you'd want this, but that I almost feel like I owe it in some way. Like, you know, it's as if we're buddies and we're at the bar and trading stories or discussions, not necessarily at the same time, you know, just over the course of a friendship or whatever, except that, like, I'm the only one talking ever. And we're playing games together, except I'm the only one playing. It's very weird, but, you know, the lonely mind does strange things, doesn't it? All right, let's send this up. This purging of memories, or at least revealing of them, it's helping in some ways. In ways that just running them in my head maybe doesn't, maybe not as much in some ways, because I'm not touching it as much as I touch it when it's just in me. But this one follows the last well enough that I feel like I have to give it now while it's still raw in my mind. This is the era of my life where I was being booted out. And you remember, if you've been watching these, how very much, you know, the love meant to me. Well, when it became clear that things weren't right and that my ex couldn't take me, couldn't survive with me there any longer, basically she gave me an option, you know, either you leave or I leave. I don't care which way it is. I can find a place to live. Or I can, you know, maintain where I am. And for me, the thinking was, this can't possibly be happening. This simply can't. It's funny because I meant to talk about before, for the first, I don't know, 5 years at least that we were together, I never trusted that she would be there. She would constantly have to tell me, look, I'm not leaving you, I love you, I want to be with you forever. By that point, I had been through enough that I didn't believe that anyone would. And mainly it was my first girlfriend, and how things went there, and who I am, and that I would not be someone could really remain with forever. I might be a good fling, but it was just inconceivable that someone could actually cope with me. And by fling, you know, it's funny because, like I said, I immediately want to move in with someone, and usually do. Usually. Anything that's been serious, I've lived with the person, you know, almost immediately. If not in reality, in essence, by just like one or the other of us moving into the other person's living quarters and never leaving. Except, you know, for sort of necessary periods and such. I'm always most comfortable living with someone. That's what I need. Even if it can be inconvenient, you know, when they walk in on you and you're jerking off or whatever. or when they're irritating you. But I need that echoing around the place. I need that knowledge that someone's there that I can go pounce on. But yeah, it was completely, so, you know, after a while, many years really, I don't know, 5, 7, what, she won my trust. I really did believe she wasn't going to go anywhere. Maybe in part because things had mellowed out and gotten down to where you know, they weren't all sunshine and fucking rainbows and unicorns anymore. And not that they ever really were that, but that glow, that shine, that blush of love, first love, that sometimes can last for a while, that was almost completely washed away, and all that was left was the will itself, which is what I'd consider love. Even not just in spite of, but maybe because of the pain and the memories to link it with, etc. And it was actually inconceivable that we were not going to be together, to me, at that point. In a sense that, and I'm sorry I have to keep getting up and checking because the power gave out on me so many times on the last one. But, yeah, I would wake up. She moved out to go, live with a friend briefly while I figured out how to get the hell out of there. And I would have no idea what to do with myself. I would watch shows on TV when I never was watching TV. I would do nothing but play computer games. I would be drowning, trying to get rid of everything, trying to make the thoughts go away. And for her, it was terribly hard, too. I know that because... about the only time I've ever heard it, but when I tried to convince her that, look, this is stupid, we can't do this, we're wrecking everything that meant anything to us, she would just wail. We're not talking crying or anything, just like this almost unholy howl of, like I was grating up against her existence and threatening to destroy it by putting that simple request to stay in love. And then, I fled back to my parents because, in a way, there was nothing for me left in Buffalo. 5 years earlier, there would have been plenty. I had friends and everything, and I could have gotten some shit job and at least, had people I had connection to, but everything was gone. The stuff that drew me back, because, I need to diverge again briefly. My first girlfriend, we were supposed to get together and after I was done with school, and so when I was done with school, when I was supposed to be done with school but didn't end up finishing enough classes, I went back to my parents there. At about but just before I left, the last few weeks I was in Buffalo there, she had dumped me, and I didn't think, just as I didn't think about some other situations like that we could have continued living together had we had any intelligence about us at all. I didn't think about, geez, I can exist in Buffalo as well as I could exist anywhere. I can get a job here and everything. And I ended up going back to my folks and staying there for 3-4 months and helping with some of the work on the barn. And I couldn't take it. There was nothing. There was nowhere to go. I didn't have a car and I couldn't drive. And there was just no way to do anything there. I would go walking in Warwick and they were moving someplace even worse, where there was absolutely nothing, out in the middle of the woods. And my soul just said, you've got nothing here. You have no life if you are here, and you will never find one. So I was playing Empires and Arms Solitaire and corresponding with my friend Dave. I wrote him like 10 pages of rules questions about it, like He's the only other person I knew that I could converse with about this game. He sent back a letter to me about it. And I just realized, that's where I gotta go. Fuck it, man. And I went back to Buffalo and eventually, met my ex-wife and other people too, and everything worked together. But the thing is, by the time we had moved to this other place, I had become kind of separated from everyone. We didn't even have our weekly gaming nights anymore. It was like, I don't know, it was no longer, there was no longer anyone there who held any value to me in terms of my life and in terms of people I could hang with or do anything with. It had just all died away. And it was just horrible. And so I moved back with my parents and no idea what I was going to do. And I would wake up in the morning and the first thing I would think is, oh shit, this is my life. Sometimes I would dream and I would dream, I don't know what, either good things or bad things, it didn't matter, but they were better than the reality when I realized that I am without everything that matters anymore. Not just losing her, but that I had lost everything, all, friends, everything. And my dad convinced me to go back to school. I already had one degree, but convinced me to go for math, and I ended up instead getting a computer science degree. But I was tortured most of the time that I was there. For 2 years while I was there, I was tortured, waking up, not always in that, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And, the funny thing is, so the first year, I think, I went up to visit my ex for Thanksgiving because she was having real problems. And we sort of made a connection. I drove up, believe it or not, 80 miles an hour the whole way to Buffalo from New Jersey, and it was snowing, so it was snowing so hard it was Thanksgiving Day, I think. No one was on the roads or anything, and I had like a week off or something, I don't know, at least a long weekend, and I mean, we reconnected in a big way, and it was obvious she wasn't, at all okay anymore, and it was obvious I wasn't, and it wasn't clear that we were going to be, that anything was still salvageable, but at least there was something there. And then I went up again for a month at Christmas time, and there we more or less decided, we still had a chance. We still had something there. She had been, when I went up on Thanksgiving, I was supposed to go up for Thanksgiving, but I think we hadn't figured out how that was going to be managed, and she ended up trying to kill herself and was hospitalized, poison. And yeah, I was visiting her in the hospital, and I was trying to get her released, and I think we managed to get her released before I left. And within all that, I mean, I blew a tire on the way up, and had to ride on my donut for like 250 miles because there was no place open because it was Thanksgiving. And I had no idea how to cope with these kind of things at all. And then, and I mean, even this is so far back, and I hardly remember it now. And yeah, then I went back. I agreed to go, or we agreed that I would come up for Christmas, and I spent a month there while I was off school. Was that the first year or was it the second year? I think it was actually all that was the second year. The first year, yeah, the first year she sent me a couple of gifts. She sent me some hot cocoa mix and apple cider mix. And I got recently similar things, a mint hot cocoa and an apple cider mix out of the bargain bin at my supermarket. Right around Christmas, after Christmas, and it reminded me of these, but these were in drawstrings and they were very, very pretty. And yeah, so I went over a year where it didn't feel like there was any chance, but then she tried to kill herself. And I was back with her for the Christmas, and it felt like we were going to give things another shot. And we would phone each other. We would phone each other fairly regularly. And I think I went back for Easter for a week as well. And for that week, that was horrible because she had made a decision to come out to Phoenix, of all places, to learn how to repair motorcycles. Now, this was as confusing to me as anything else. But I kept kind of pushing for her not to do that. That, you know, I was applying to schools, places, just put it off for a year or whatever, because wherever I could be, then we could be together there. I couldn't see how motorcycle repair could be this major life's goal, you know. And before she had been pursuing archaeology, that made sense to me. I could understand that. And somehow the mesh of that and maybe some other things, it just broke us apart. I mean, we were just on the phone anyway for the most part. And I don't know quite what happened. I had a later experience kind of like that, but with someone that I knew nowhere near as well. Well, obviously, I mean, who could I know as well as her? Even myself, maybe, I don't know. But then again, no, because I couldn't predict her. But someone I knew almost, almost not at all, who made a similar choice to go to beauty school. And it's like, and it didn't work for her, you know, and I don't know what worked for my ex-wife. I'm not even sure how we sort of failed at the end, except that it hinged around that we were not going to be able to be together because of her decision and because of me going to grad school. And I felt like I had to go to grad school. I felt like by the time I was looking for work, though, because at the same time I was I was accepted at grad school and trying to figure out whether or not I wanted to go, I was still looking for work because it seemed less important to go to grad school if it wasn't for her. But during that same period, I had kind of decided, well, the hell with it, you know, I might as well get a job. And I wasn't having an easy time with that. But prior to that, I was pretty much convinced I want to go to grad school. I want to get a doctorate. I can make a life for us. We'll be able to live off of my stipend at the very least. And, you know, if not that, well, you know, if she can't work anywhere else under those circumstances. But I really can't quite put my finger on what wrecked things. The only thing that I can think of is that there was almost this inherent scorn at the choice she was making. And that it was just so far beneath the person that I knew. And it was similar to that. I don't remember when I noticed this. I think when I came up to visit for Christmas, where she put a cigarette out in a glass or something like that. Just, you know, it was such the kind of thing that some of her old friends would have done, and so much not what she would have done. And it was just like, God, you know, they've just so corrupted the person I knew in so many little ways. And I don't know. But, yeah. And then I didn't have any real contact after that. Until after I moved here. I had no idea where she was or anything. I passed on information as to where I was because I needed her to sign away rights if I was going to buy a house on my own, basically. We were still married on paper. And she refused to do that. It was just like, just get a divorce, you know. And yeah, that's what I did. But, and that ended up a really, really good thing because the prices dropped by more than 50%. Well, yeah, by more than 50% in the time that I was considering that. I mean, they were half what they were when I started looking, and they were half again that when I actually purchased. Of course, nobody could get a mortgage at that point for condos, but that was okay. And but what really struck me was that sense of loss for so long. I mean, seriously, all the time that I was at my dad's, and that was a hellish situation, and I was doing very well in school, perhaps because it was hellish. That's 2 years. Yeah, I took nothing but computer science classes for 2 years, and still ended up coming out like with a pretty amazing GPA out of it. Because I was in hell. Not because I was trying to escape, but because I was in hell and had to impress. But every morning I would wake up and just, it was like, oh fuck, why am I still alive? I made a trip out west with a girl I was in love with. In a probably non-reciprocal sort of way. She had interest, but not of that sort. And it was not just the two of us. It was a school trip. And then when I found out she was there, going on it, I had an opportunity to go before, and I was like, I would want to go that. I went along with it. And then we barely like dealt with each other on the whole thing, but I had a great time. But the whole trip, I mean, I would wake up outside. We were doing lots of driving, lots of time to think. And, I don't know, like Comfortably Numb would come on. It was on one of the tapes that we were listening to quite often. And it fits so well, because I could feel on that trip that it was being, that I was losing the connection to her and to the caring and everything, in terms of like it just wrecking me completely. And then when I went out to Oregon, there was little or no hope there. I mean, I no longer really had any great desire to try to connect or anything like that. And there, I tried to fall in love several more times, and succeeded once again with someone I totally misinterpreted. I mean, when they say they love you and it doesn't mean anything. Yeah, I don't know. But during that time, I sort of started really exploring Asperger's and hanging out a lot on Wrong Planet until I got banned from there. I got banned because I was an admin. Well, I was a moderator. Didn't like what some of their policies were, so I resigned being a moderator. Took up being a gadfly instead. But yeah, and I, you know, while I was there were so many magical things. So there was this, and I was able to meet people through that website who, you know, were either college age or right around college age, which is what I kind of need, I think. And then just in terms of, you know, emotional development or whatever, even from Aspie's, I need to be kind of a little younger than... they're still trainable at that point. And I don't mean necessarily just for a relationship. I mean out of friendships or anything. You need to listen to me crack that whip. So, you know, I had hopes with that. And there were bands that I started following. After the first year, I started dancing more and more, and I started following some bands, and then I started going. There was a wonderful Thursday night, 80s night, and that's where I decided I fell in love, and with someone that I barely, you know, spoke any words with, basically, just from I don't know what, you know. I'm not a sane person, and I was so convinced, as I've been at other times, you know, like when I say you got to hit me over the head with a brick. Well, on the other hand, I can be completely convinced that someone has totally fallen for me that I've not spoken 2 words to. And, whatever, you know. Luckily, I'm not terribly dangerous. But at least not anymore. And it was clear that that was not a possibility anymore, and that I wasn't finding a job in Eugene. And I got myself a phone, managed to get a couple interviews, like within a week of putting my resume up, people were calling. And during the process, after they called, no one else called. So I had like 2 phone calls that were basically, we'd hire you. My choices there were Arizona, Phoenix, and Milwaukee. And it's like, well, what do I want? Well, I was in the midst of being in love another time. A couple of people in a row there that were just online contacts. One who wasn't too far away and wouldn't fucking meet me. And the other was in Sweden and said she'd come as soon as, you know, I could get set up in something that we could live, and she'd give it a shot. And that seemed pretty damn weird, but I was like, okay, well. And she was like, I always wanted to try living in a desert. And then she just kind of vaporized online without really saying anything. At least the other one made excuses for why we couldn't meet. Oh, that it would hurt me. And that she couldn't risk because she had a kid, which the fact that she had a kid pretty much prevented me from having any real long-term interest, but it would have been fun. Yeah, I came here and just kind of got latched into the life of working, and I was able to find dancing here early on, which didn't last long enough, and a very, very... all hope was gone by that point. All hope was largely gone in Eugene by that point, too. Otherwise I wouldn't have, you know, been like, oh yeah, to a girl in Sweden. And then, you know, what ends up happening? Almost the exact same thing with a girl in Sweden. When I got sick here, I met a girl through an online dating site, and you know, we're married now. And she was in Belgium at the time, and but she actually came and visited for a month out of nowhere. It sounded so much like the other one. I didn't expect to see her. I expected to go to the airport and her not show up. I know somebody that happened to it. It was to a female awaiting a male, I think. But yeah, and it was just, you know, it was a matter of, well, I'm not finding anyone else. I'm not finding any other way. You know, it wasn't, and I think the same for her. Just a matter of no connection anywhere with anyone that really hooked. And I wouldn't say either of us is entirely pleased, but we love one another and lead a life that in many ways, not long from the beginning, was like the pale shadow that my ex and I had. But at least we're used to it. I guess don't expect anything more. And the funny thing is, for me, I don't know about for her, but for me, I just become more entrenched in what I have. And it becomes harder for me to pull away from it or to make a serious effort. And there's a certain responsibility, you know. After she visited, well, while she was visiting, I still couldn't tell. I couldn't tell for sure. But then I visited her, and I still couldn't really tell. Like, it's not a perfect match. It's not anything like that. My ex was. Everyone else I've ever been with has felt more passionate of a connection. And that just doesn't exist here, but I don't know if that can even exist for me anymore at all. It's hard to tell. The only people I've felt passionate about while I was feeling terribly passionate recently were A, people I couldn't really reach, and B, maybe that's the big one. Now, B, almost all, there was almost a non-sexual aspect to that passion. So like, the girl I felt for the hardest in Eugene, and she wasn't the only one that I felt this way about, it was almost like a puppy love type of feeling. In the sense of, you know, I didn't imagine us having sex or anything like that until, like, I knew it couldn't happen. It was just kind of like, wow. Reminded me of the kind of crushes that I had like in middle school or something. It was just really weird. But I don't know. So you get to hear, if you listened to the whole thing, with the breaks that are at random, and I don't know how long, and this may be one of them, no. Some crap about me as if I was sitting in the bar drinking across from you. And that's about it.